Yes, on this episode of the 21st Century Physio podcast, we're joined by an old friend and colleague, Luke Fuller. We first worked together 10 years ago, and since then he's gone on some great things, working as a physiotherapist and osteopath on the ATP and running his own successful practice in Toronto, Canada. In the episode, he's going to talk to you about how you can get into elite sport and the pathway that he took to get there. It's really quite a remarkable journey. And he also talks about the differences between physiotherapy and osteopathy, one of the most common questions that I know I get as a dual qualified physiotherapist and osteopath. Now let's get straight into it. Let's speak to Luke. All right, so welcome, Luke. Welcome to the 21st Century Physio podcast. I'm really excited to have you on here today. We obviously go back a little while now. I think we first crossed paths probably 10 plus years ago when I was still a second year osteo student working with yourself in the VFL with the Tassie Devils. So it's a really great honour to have you on here, and you've gone on to do some really exciting things since then. Probably a few more exciting things than the Tassie Devils, because I think that year that we worked from was the last year that they were in the VFL. I hope that was nothing to do with us. But welcome to the podcast. Now, Luke, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? You know, you've obviously got a very interesting background, being dual qualified as an osteo and a physio, as well as having done an undergrad in anatomy as well. And now working on the other side of the world, moved from Melbourne, you're living in Toronto and working on the ATP. So I'm really interested to hear about your journey.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Well, firstly, I think it's a great year working at the Tassie Devils with you and that, and always knew that you'd go on and do some great things, and, certainly a fun year there. And yeah, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but 10 years goes fast, I guess. But thanks for having us on. I appreciate the time. And basically I started, as you mentioned, doing an undergraduate at Melbourne University and, sort of majored in anatomy. And that was, a lot of fun and really learned a lot and, sort of, I guess, entrenched my interest and passion with the human body and wanted to take that into my next sort of passion, which was sport. So I always wanted to do physiotherapy, and after the science, towards the third year, I found out a lot about osteopathy and the philosophies, and that made a lot of sense to me. So I sort of got into that and physiotherapy at the end of the third year of science, and also I was due to do sort of an honours in anatomy, so I had a few choices to make, and I went for the osteo, basically because I found out a lot at the time. I thought it was quite holistic, and anyway, sort of 5 years through that, and it was a great course. I think very rigorous and thorough, and really enjoyed the course at Victoria University, and I started to practice, and I was just loving life and really enjoying the treating, and had been doing a little bit with the football club that I'd been playing with at the time, Aberfeldy in the Eston League, and just found I enjoyed the treating and some of the aspects of that, and rehab more than rehabbing my own injuries. So I sort of quit playing and just become sort of the full-time, I guess, osteo/trainer with Aberfeldy, and that was a really invaluable experience. I think applying your craft and in an acute setting, but also following the guys up during the week and probably having a bit more responsibility than, maybe I don't know if you deserve, but maybe had earned at that stage, and so that was a great learning experience. And anyway, I was working in private practice, and I sort of found that I was seeing a lot of spinal conditions, and I enjoyed that, but not enough peripheral joint injuries. So sort of got thinking and thought, well, the public's not going to change, or it's going to take a long while. So I sort of looked into doing the Masters of Physio, which I then sort of did. And the first year was pretty torturous. It was, a lot of basic stuff that I'd already done. And yeah, I was thinking to myself, what the hell have I done? But the second year was a bit more practical, and learn a little bit along the way there. And I think just to get the certificate and combine the two, it was a great move, and probably end up, opening up a few doors later on for me. So that's probably a little bit about my academic background. Since I've done the certified strength and conditioner, I've been over here, and so that's a bit about my background.
So, obviously, very similar background to myself. I'm pretty sure you tried to persuade me not to go back and do the physio course at one stage. What do you think the main differences are between physiotherapy and osteopathy, given that you're one of the few people around the world to have done both, especially at a master's level?
Yeah, well, I think probably the dissuasion was probably in the first year. As I say, it was quite frustrating doing, ethics 101 and things when you're already a primary healthcare practitioner. But anyway, you sort of jump through some hoops and do what you need to do. But, I just feel that, there's a lot of overlap these days in all the manual therapies, and, you can learn some techniques off of chiro and incorporate them into your practice. You can learn some techniques off a massage therapist and incorporate them. You can learn something off an exercise physiologist and incorporate that into your rehab. So I think these days there's quite a bit of overlap, and I think people treat differently according to their styles and philosophies and training. And some techniques people are more comfortable with than others. Some people might manipulate a bit more than others, and some use more soft tissue, for example. So I think, we're all individuals. We try to use our best knowledge and resources and, clinical reasoning and experience to hopefully get a good result for our patients. But, I guess to answer your question, it's probably more blurred than ever to me. I get asked a lot, to explain the difference and what am I treating as, and I basically go back to where I learnt the technique. But, for me now, it's just a collection of techniques, and I try and use them as I feel appropriately for different conditions. So, hopefully that answers your question. I mean, I was never one that was sort of going through the course, bagging one of the other professions, that I wasn't doing. And I think, we can all learn from each other and work together and, play to our strengths, I think. But, I think it's quite individualistic. But obviously there's some differences, from a philosophy level. And, I think physio's got more traditional roots with, GPs and sports doctors and things. And osteo, I think, is growing, no doubt, around the world. It's really grown a lot in Australia since I studied, and I think it's got a bright future. But I'm a big believer of working in a team, and his strength is in the team, really. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it is a really hard question to answer. I think, as in our courses, we get people from over 10 different professions, and I think there's no difference between a good, practitioner or professional in any of the professions. I think, especially as we start to all use similar techniques, similar research, and hopefully striving towards similar results for our patients and clients. So it is a really tough one to define, but I think you've done a really good job there. You mentioned, the physio, going back into physio opened up, a few doors for you potentially. What sort of, doors did it open? What did it allow you to do that you couldn't have done as an osteopath?
Yeah, well, I think probably more in the sport. As I say, I was doing some work in the Eston League with Aberfeldy, and my favourite sport still is the AFL and Aussie rules, and I really enjoyed that. And then when I sort of got the opportunity with the Tassie Devils in the VFL, that was a lot of fun, and working with yourself and sort of doing a little bit of travel, I thought that was great. And I don't think even that role potentially could have been available, had I not had the physio, especially given, the standing in sport. And I think, as an osteo, my feeling is, you're more than qualified for that role, but, I guess with physiotherapy's roots and alignment with traditional medicine, and it's that was probably something that helped me a lot. Unfortunately, the Tassie Devils folded, as you mentioned, so we all didn't have a job the following year. But then I started to do a little bit of work with Tennis Australia, and at the time working in a clinic, we looked after a lot of young high performance tennis athletes, and I think from there I was doing a few of the junior nationals and nationals around the country, and combined the private practice with a little bit of travelling, and really enjoyed that, and it was a good variety to what I did. And tennis, I really enjoyed the sport, but didn't play it a lot, and thought, well, the ability to travel, and it was a great sport. You can see every joint, every part of the body. So, rather than something like soccer, I guess, where probably 50%, I think, or more are lower limb injuries, you sort of get the full gamut of body parts involved. So that was a lot of fun, and that sort of, I guess, led me on to sort of pursue tennis more specifically.
So obviously now you've been on the ATP circuit for quite a number of years. How did you end up on the circuit working with some of those elite professionals? I know, just checking out your website before, you've got your hands all over Rafa on the all over the website there. So what was your journey that took you from working at the Tassie Devils over to the United States and travelling around the world on the ATP?
Well, I think it came, as I say, from the interest with Tennis Australia and just the enjoyment doing that, and travelling to a few tournaments around Australia. And so I thought, well, look, I probably had a bigger background and knowledge of Aussie rules, and I'd worked with some sprinters, and but I didn't have a big sort of background at that time in tennis. So I thought I have to increase my knowledge base and skills to go any further. So I researched a little bit. I think at the time there were 6 other guys or 7 other guys that worked on the ATP tour, and so I sort of had a little bit of a goal, and but I knew that I had a lot to improve and a lot to learn before I could be in a position to to do something like that. So I quit my job, and saved up for a few months and went on a bit of a trip, I guess, around the world, and started sort of in the UK, and met a few people that at Wimbledon, and I just had a lucky sort of run, I guess, and one person would sort of introduce me to another, and it's probably too long a story to tell it all now, but anyway, I end up getting an opportunity to work with a top 10 WTA player at the US Open. I think it was in 2008 or 9, and I was just there to meet with our head of sort of medical services, Todd Ellenbecker, at the time, and I'd organised that sort of interview with through I guess Tennis Australia, our manager at the time, who'd formerly worked on the WTA. So that was just a meeting, and sort of we met, and he'd said to me at the time, there's no positions, but sort of keep doing what you're doing, and try and get some more knowledge, and we'll keep your CV pretty much. So then I went to Florida, and I was working with some tennis coaches, and went to his clinic in Phoenix, and went across to Spain to a tennis conference, and then back to the States to another one, and so I was free and didn't have any real commitment, so I had the ability to do that, and I was just learning a lot all the time, and then I was lucky enough to get the opportunity when one of the guys left actually to work with Federer, so I got an opportunity after that, and then a few months later I was starting my first tournament in Brisbane, and I think this is my 9th year with the ATP World Tour, and it's been a great journey and one I've thoroughly enjoyed.
I think there's a little bit more than luck involved there. I think it takes a lot to go out on your own and quit your job and just decide to travel the world. You obviously had some pretty strong goals to achieve, as you said. What was some of the biggest learning experiences you had along the way, and what are some of the things that you think you needed to improve on when you came out of university to land that job at the professional elite level?
I think it's a lot about getting as much experience as you can, and working with different people, and I really tried to treat as much as I could in those first few years, and go above and beyond in terms of I'd always work Saturdays, and just anyone that you can learn from. I remember I was working at Life Care in Croydon, and great sports doctor there, Dr. Nick Van Wettering. We would treat, and all the patients had gone, and him and I would be last there, and such a wealth of experience, and I'd be learning a lot from him, and so I think I just had the attitude that you can learn from anyone, and even I used to work with an old sports trainer at Aberfeldy who had no formal qualifications, but had sort of worked in the industry for probably 40 years, and he taught me a lot in terms of taping and managing people in an acute setting. I guess I was just really hungry to learn and improve, and when I sort of had the idea and thought tennis was sort of pretty cool sport with the ability to travel, I really went after it, and tried to learn as much as I could from whether it was a coach or someone in the sport, whatever they were doing. I guess that's probably what I'd really recommend anyone try and do. Really, just get as much knowledge as you can and try and put into practice.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like going through your university studies, one of the best things I think you can do is work as a sports trainer. I think, as you said, it exposes you to a lot of acute injuries that you don't see, and helps you start to manage people, I think, as well, and manage expectations. It's a big part of learning. And the trainers, as you said, have been around, have got that actual practical knowledge, even though they've got no actual qualifications. The ones that have been around for 40 years, as you said, there's some gems you can pick up from them for managing those acute patients.
Yeah, I mean, that's invaluable. I'd recommend any, even student, second or third year to, enroll at your local club, whether it's, basketball or football, or, help out at, somewhere where you can just get your hands on and, practice some of the things that you're learning. You go through the knee and you're learning some of the physical examination, and then all of a sudden, a knee's in front of you and you can try every test for the first time, and obviously you're not qualified, but you can get a positive and maybe send them off to an appropriate place, a sports doctor or qualified physio or osteo, to get further opinion. So you're right. I mean, it's invaluable stuff and really a big part of learning, I think. And you can look at textbooks all day, but in all my time practicing, I don't think the pure textbook cases come in a lot. So, you got to be look outside the box, I think. Definitely.
And so going from obviously working in the ATP, you've now obviously got a successful clinic in Toronto itself, eight sports clinics. So how do you find the management of patients differs between working at an elite level and then working with your patients in a clinic environment?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't treat people any differently. I mean, I think I try and be fairly much the same with everyone. Um, I think when I first started with the tennis, I think naturally, your first few tournaments, you're a little bit overawed and, nervous probably more than anything. But, now I think, I try and just treat each person the same and listen to their story and try and, find a solution for them. But, um, yeah, that's pretty much, I think, part of it. You got to remember that, it might be an injury or something that is holding them back from doing something they love. So, I like to sort of take it personal and try and, get a result for them as quickly as I can. I guess in terms of managing expectations, you do learn a lot from working with the elite athletes because, I think early on they really put pressure on you and that to, get them back quicker or give them an answer quicker. And I think, you naturally get better at that, I think, when you put under a bit of pressure and, you have to go back and really reflect and, evaluate your time frames and things like that. But, I guess with experience, you become a bit more comfortable and, yeah, I just try and treat everyone the same.
Yep. No, I think everyone's an athlete. They've just got different goals, I think, and that we need to tailor for the individual what their needs, wants, and goals are, and what their long-term outcome is. So I think that's a really nice approach. So, you mentioned before you did you recently done a strength and conditioning course, which is something that I find really added some tools into my toolkit as a therapist. What did you take away from doing the strength and conditioning qualifications, and where does that fit into your practice now?
Well, I think it's, the full circle, really. I mean, as you said before, there is a lot of overlap between the professions and even in the Masters of Physio. You can have some exercise physiologists, you can have some, osteos, you can have some nurses. So, you potentially from different backgrounds. But, I think it's, exercise is really important. I've always been very active and involved in sports and love to do it myself, and so many health benefits. So, I really encourage that, and I think the strength and conditioning part has been, just good to add to your knowledge. In the clinic, we've got an exercise physiologist and a couple of trainers, and normally I'll sort of refer out to them to do most of it now, but I still do a little bit myself. And yeah, it's just getting sort of buy-in from your patients, and it's a good to have that knowledge to go from sort of rehab to performance, I think.
And how's that received over in Canada? I guess the main question I ask is, what's the biggest difference you find between maybe practicing as a physiotherapist and osteopath in Australia versus practicing in Canada? Is there any major differences?
I think, I mean, the training, I think, in Australia is outstanding. And yeah, not to say it's not in Canada because I haven't been through that system, but I think osteo is a lot bigger in Australia, and the course is more rigorous and regulated, and so that's probably one difference with the osteo. But your patients have got the same injuries, different sports, I guess, in terms of what we see. I still don't know a lot about hockey, but I see a few hockey players, and yeah, so I guess it's more just the activities that people do. There's really no netball over here, so we're not seeing a lot of young girls with ACLs or anything like that, like you would potentially in Australia. So I would just say it's probably more with the activities, and with the seasons over here, there's a short golf season, and then the snow's there, and people are shoveling, and they haven't done it for 6 or 9 months. So I find there's a lot of injuries that happen acutely just because they're an unaccustomed activity. You know, the person hasn't played golf for 6 months, and then the weather gets better and they play, 4 times that week and they hurt their back, So there are a couple of differences, I guess, in terms of practicing.
And there's some big differences there. It's quite foreign to me, the concept of the shoveling the snow. It's definitely not something we have to worry about down here in Melbourne, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the end of part 1 of my interview with Luke Fuller. Look forward to giving you part 2 later in the year when I catch up with him in Toronto, Canada to run our first ever Mat Live course in Canada.